trying to just avoid those thoughts, I say, okay, thought, I acknowledge you, I see you, I hear you, I smell you, whatever. And I kind of have made friends with my anxiety now, where it wants me to be anxious, and I treat it more like an anxious friend, and that wants, that's worried about me, that wants me, and I just say, okay, I hear you, but I just don't agree with you.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. I have a dark guest today. No, not a dark guest. I have a very interesting guest today, a therapist turned explorer who finds light in the world's darkest places. And he is also the author of the book Beyond the Darkness. And I think there is a lot to find out from this man. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Chad Scott.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for having me. I've been looking forward to being here with you.
You've
Love
been
your show.
looking forward to share the darkness with me?
I actually, my motto is you got to walk through the darkness to find the light, and so the point of it is to find the light. But yeah, you definitely walk through the darkness to get there.
I totally agree. And I think we also, in order to see the light, we need darkness, don't we?
We do, or at least to see the true light. I think people who avoid the darkness stay in their comfort zones, and they really never get to experience life the way maybe God intended.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, they just live in the gray zone, in the comfort zone, which is,
Yeah,
I always say the comfort zone is the place where our dreams go to die.
yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to use that one. That's very true.
Yeah,
I
I
say
don't know if
I tell
I
people.
invented it.
Well, hey, we'll give you credit. But I say, I'll take credit for this one that I feel like I invented. I say, comfort zones are for couch potatoes. Nothing grows in comfort zones other than anxiety, depression, and comfort zones get smaller and smaller over time. And pretty soon your world is tiny.
So true, so true. Now let's dive into this because I'm very, very interested. I read like one thing that I'm fascinated by, and I don't think I've ever met anybody. You had a liver transplant. That
I
is quite
did.
a big deal, isn't it?
It was a big deal, yeah. About a year and a half ago, I had it. And the interesting part is I didn't realize how sick I was. I was actually out in Oslo, in Germany, Poland. I was on a kind of a tour of dark places, to be honest. And I started getting sick over there. And I got back, had my blood work done because I knew I had liver disease for maybe a couple of years, but didn't realize it would necessarily end in a transplant. But my blood work had just gotten terrible. And within a month, I was on the transplant list. And about a month after that, I was called for a transplant. So, and as soon as I woke up, I knew life was different because I felt so good. And it wasn't the narcotics, I don't think. It was the like my eyes, they had been yellow, my skin yellow, itchy. And I had like no energy for many years. I mean, I would say my liver disease went back 10 plus years because as soon as I recovered, I thought like, man, I have so much more energy and that's actually how this book came about because I live in northern Minnesota and it is winter here and it was just getting into spring and I was felt myself backsliding after I got away from the hospital because I just couldn't do anything. I was stuck in my house. I was stuck in my comfort zone, which I didn't like. I need to be out of my comfort zone. Being out of my comfort zone is my comfort zone, I think. So I went out to California all by myself and this was, I think, 6 weeks after my transplant. I went out to California, did a lot of walking, and I found myself in celebrity graveyards 2 days in a row. And I started thinking, and then I had plans to go to the Queen Mary, which is this haunted ship that's very storied out of England. Churchill sailed on it, and there's these, and it's supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the world. And so I was looking most forward to going to these places, and it hit me when I was out there, like, why do I always find myself in these dark places? And I really reflected on why I did, and that's where the book was born because I think those places, walking through the darkness, literally in some of these places, is life changing, and your own reflections. If you go in there with a lot of reverence for the things that have happened, and especially in historically dark places like Auschwitz. You go into those places and with such reverence and try to empathize, and then you see little pieces of yourself in there, and it is life changing. And it really helped me go through my my darkest hours with almost no fear.
Now you're saying about you had a liver, or just to end subject with the liver transplant, but
Yeah.
you had liver disease, but then it got really bad. What were your symptoms when it got really bad, when you realized that something changed?
It was interesting because I'll preface this with my liver doctor at the University of Minnesota said, "How did your doctors not see this in your blood work?" So I had had it for many years and they didn't find it until the symptoms. So I had end stage liver disease when I was first diagnosed. I was first diagnosed with end stage liver disease, and I had gone in with an upset stomach basically. And they said, "Oh, it's gastritis." I went to the ER, the emergency room, a couple of times, and they said, "Oh, just take these over the counter pills, you'll be fine." And it never got fine. And then I started turning yellow, and then I started retaining a lot of water, and then they did a an ultrasound on me and found that it was severe cirrhosis.
Amazing. But, and how do you feel now? You said a year and a half in. How do you feel? I mean, you obviously must be on some kind of medication for the rest of
Yeah,
your life, I would imagine.
yeah. And I think 60% of all adults have a chronic disease. So I don't really feel any different than anyone. If I could tell you how good I feel, I'd be jumping on my chair, dancing in circles. I mean, I feel so good. I feel when I'm 47, and when I woke up, I felt like I was in my 20s again, and I haven't stopped. I just feel so good. Have so much energy, where before I was sleeping in my car. I'm a mental health therapist, and between my clients, I was sleeping on the couch, and I just had no energy. And now I have endless energy, and I'm playing sports again, and I'm just out. So it's amazing how life has changed. Um, and I probably lost your question, but
No, 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 that was the
okay,
question. I just wanted to know
okay.
really because the thing is, or what you were saying, and what I've noticed many times, you don't
Mhm.
actually, at the beginning, you don't even realize how bad you feel. You just take it for normal until you are
Yeah.
better. And then now you realize how good you feel. So the big difference.
Yeah, for many years I struggled with just this, I just thought it was aging and it wasn't aging. And the doctors missed it because I had just a plethora of autoimmune issues before that. That's part of the book is about how what led up to the liver disease um and with that also I had just a ton of anxiety uh, and I was able to kind of conquer all of that, and I really conquered the anxiety going to these dark places. But the health issues were still there, so I was still dealing with the health issues. And then after my transplant, I mean, so I went through the whole liver disease almost with zero anxiety, where before it actually ruined my marriage, my anxiety, or a part of the reason, probably the biggest reason was my anxiety. And yeah, it was life changing when I woke up from that surgery.
Amazing. So your interest in the dark places
Hmm.
was obviously way before you had your transplant, but
Absolutely, yeah.
it was connected. Was it connected to your anxiety? And if for the people who are listening, what would be your biggest tip or whatever you want to call it to fight anxiety or to heal? And can we heal anxiety?
Absolutely. Anxiety, 1 in 5 people will have an anxiety disorder in any year. So it's by far the most common mental health issue. It's probably the most treatable mental health issue. Um, I didn't realize actually how much anxiety I had. So I had, you know, my dad had gotten sick during this time. So I would say the last 6 months of my marriage, my dad had gotten sick, and then I was dealing with a lot of serious autoimmune issues. I had vasculitis. Harold Ramis from the Ghostbusters, he died of vasculitis. They didn't know if I had a deadly type or a type that would go away. It was just kind of a wait and see. And during this time, I had this, anxiety that I probably had all my life, but it just really came to the boiling point. And at that time, my wife had some issues too. So it was all, playing off each other. And after she asked for a divorce, and I like the anxiety was getting to the point where I just couldn't even live with myself anymore. In my own body, my anxiety was so bad. So I started meditating. I started doing all the things I talked to my clients about. I finally maybe admitted that my anxiety was that big of a problem because I just felt like, well, if this would get better and my health would get better and my dad would get better, everything would be fine again. And the thing is, underlying all that was the anxiety. Because what I found is when I went through the liver disease, which was objectively the should have been the worst time in my life. I mean, I was diagnosed with liver cancer, but I never actually I ended up not having liver cancer. But I thought for 9 months that I had liver cancer. Almost no anxiety during this whole time, and that's how much your anxiety can improve with basically self-help therapy. I took medications for about a year, even though my anxiety went away within a couple of months. I mean, almost completely gone, and it really hasn't returned. And that was probably, oh gosh, 6 years ago, maybe when that went away. So I got to the point where I was jumping out of airplanes, and I did taking alligators out of ponds with a guide with me, but we're helping a veterinary staff at a place, and we'd go out in ponds, and I took venomous snake handling classes, dove with sharks. I mean, so from somebody who had so much anxiety and couldn't do any of that stuff, it's just amazing how when you decide to step out of your comfort zone and getting help was outside my comfort zone. Going to therapy was outside my comfort zone. I went to therapy. But meditation was huge. I had this voice in the back of my head all the time, just constantly after she asked for a divorce, saying, how I screwed things up, how as kind of this poet writing the saddest love letter in history, just always in my brain. Meditation within days just shut that off. It never returned. It was just beautiful. So, and that's what anxiety is. It's just having all these thoughts that are just going, 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 going. And it's like, okay, pay attention to one thing, and that really cured the problem.
Yeah, and you say it's like also, people living rent free in your head, and you're
Yeah.
allowing it. That's what I call it. But
Yeah.
you mentioned something which because I'm a hypnotherapist, and
I was
uh,
gonna say, you sound like a therapist.
I hear a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
but you do agree with me that sometimes a little medication is necessary. People say, "Oh, I don't want to take pills,"
Right.
they are addictive and da da da. But sometimes just to kick it off and to actually get the
Exactly.
strength to do this stuff that you need to do, I
Yep.
think there's nothing wrong with it.
Right, right. I avoided it for so long during at the end of my marriage. Part of the reason too, I don't think I wanted to admit it that is having an issue was because I have a pilot's license, and I was going for what they call an instrument rating, which allows you to fly in bad weather, but it's actually more difficult and more expensive to get that than your regular pilot's license. And I was really getting into flying, and I was getting right to the end of that training, and then all this happens. I'm like, I, and as pilots, if you admit you have a mental health issue, you're grounded for at least 6 months if you're going to go on medication. So I just really resisted as long as I could, and unfortunately, that it kind of ended in severe anxiety. But yeah, that medication, I could, they usually say a month to 6 weeks, it starts really hitting you and taking full effect if you're on an SSRI. But I could feel it within, I mean, for sure within a week, where it's like, wow, I can't believe how much this is helping my body. And I really felt my anxiety in my body because I'm a therapist, and I was good with challenging the thoughts. And I really thought that's all I have to do is challenge these thoughts. But your anxiety can be so bad that you need to fix the biological part of it. And that's what the medications do. And once the biological part of it went away, I was able to basically fix all of it then.
Yeah, absolutely. But it kickstarts the
Yeah.
healing process. Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think also the healing process is one thing, but I think we also need to maintain that. It's not like once it's fixed, everything is fine. I think when you're prone a little bit to anxiety, you know it and you work with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like now my body, I can, I still get an anxious thought here and there. I mean, I'm normal. I think my anxiety is within normal limits now, but I'll still get an anxious thought. And, instead of trying to just avoid those thoughts, I say, okay, thought, I acknowledge you. I see you. I hear you. I smell you, whatever. And I kind of have made friends with my anxiety now, where it wants me to be anxious, and I treat it more like an anxious friend, and that wants, that's worried about me, that wants me, and I just say, okay, I hear you, but I just don't agree with you, and I just kind of blow it away then,
I don't really have time for you.
like acknowledging it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I think you know, there's so many people in this world who pretend that everything is always so totally fine, and it's not. I think we all I call it, it's a little shit in our lives. It's just normal.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes we have a lot of shit in our lives, like I did at that time, you know.
Yes, yes, it all comes
And
together. Now let's talk about dark places
yeah,
because that's because it's most memorable journey. So, which journey was the darkest?
I will say I'm not going to say there's any one journey that was the darkest. I'll say that there was a handful, and the common threads between the darkest are, for one, how much they hit home to me. Where, for example, Hiroshima was a huge one, and I think it was because I'm an American, and I know that was America that dropped the bomb on civilian populations, and that one killed me. That one absolutely killed me. Um, and Auschwitz was another one that, the gas chamber. I mean, the whole place, but in particular, the gas chamber, and that's how I start off my introduction in the book is being in the gas chamber at Auschwitz, and how going down those same steps that thousands of people went down, and you're in there, and and I let my tour group go to the next room because they just kind of seem to talk about it and then go on to the next room, and I just like, this is significant, and I was just stopped in my tracks, and I spent maybe an extra minute in there alone, and I could just feel the sadness in that room coming out of the cracks in the walls, and you could just picture the people dropping one by one. And you know, I knew right there and then my life was changed forever. And then you walk through the next room with the furnaces, and there's rail tracks going to the furnaces, and you're thinking like, oh my God, this is like, I mean, this is what McDonald's does. It's a conveyor, throwing thing. It's just the industrial size of what happened. It just hits you when you see these rail tracks and these ovens, and then you go out, and it's such a relief going out. And I just sat there and kind of reflected as the tour, like I couldn't even pay attention to what the tour person was saying at that point. I was just in my own world. And I think from that experience, you get little reflections in those places, and they stay with you. They burn in a different place than normal memories do. Most of us, at least in the United States, we remember the Challenger crash. People my age will remember when the Challenger crashed. People in the older age group remembers when John F. Kennedy crashed. I mean, we all remember when 9/11 happened. So those are burnt in a certain part of our brain, the hippocampus, where other memories go to other parts of the brain, and you have to really recall them, and sometimes you forget them. But those memories are always right there, etched in that hippocampus. And when you're going through your own hard times, um, those experiences come back to kind of guide you. They help you to not feel so alone in your own suffering, and um, and also going through the dark. And the darker, I don't want to say the darker the better. That sounds like you're minimizing it, but when you go through these really historically profound dark places, it's almost like a spiritual experience. And on the other side of that, you love deeper. It's, you colors are brighter. You're just a more loving, good humanitarian, and the meaning of your own life really comes into stark perspective when you walk through places like that. Um, yeah,
I think you want to live more. When you realize what. But
yeah,
the one thing well, I don't know if doesn't no, not annoy is not the word, but that shocks me in a way is that humans never learn.
right, right. I mean, look at the
I mean,
United States right now. Yeah,
you're talking about Hiroshima and you're talking about Auschwitz, but it's happening all over the world in many different
yeah,
places again and
yeah,
again and again. So what's wrong
yeah.
with us?
I think different narratives. So they say, well, just because we're, you know, uh, because, well, like in Gaza, I mean, they came out and they did some terrible things to the Israelis during that horrible, horrible day. Well, now they're using that to justify genocide in Gaza. In the United States, they're making a really concerted effort to ban books, to reduce, to hide the heritage of slavery and genocide of Native Americans. And And if you walk through the topography of terror in Berlin, it talks about, and I'm not making it in a comparison with Hitler and Donald Trump or anything. People make that, but it's these little insidious things that right now they're in the topography of terror, it talks about how the early Nazis, before they were the Nazis we know today, they took over cities in Germany under because of crime. The police, they took over the police departments in these cities. Well, what ended up happening is those same police started arresting political opponents, and right now we're putting police,
Happening
military
again.
in
Yeah.
cities in America. And somebody needs to sound the alarm. Again, I'm not saying that they're Nazis. They're not Nazis, but what they're doing is dangerous, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter what they're called, it's just happening over and over again.
Yeah,
And the sad thing is that the world, there's so many things happen in so many places in this world, and we are watching and we are shocked, but nobody does
yeah.
anything. And because okay, it's also dangerous to do something, depending on how big the impact is. So it's I don't know, it's quite difficult to I sometimes find it very difficult to be human.
It is. It is. I put a very simple post this last weekend, and I almost never make political posts. And this wasn't a political post. I thought it was just a kind of an innocent, United States world, owns the world, is the world's leader in citizens owning guns, and the world's leader in gun rights, but we're not the world's leader in gun safety. So I just made a video saying, if we're going to leader in that, we need to be the leader in gun safety. I had about, I think I'm pushing 500 comments on there, and and they're almost all. I mean, I almost want to post them and just say, like, look at these comments. I mean, you wonder why people, if you're treating people like this, no wonder why they shoot. I mean, all I was saying is gun safety starts with treating people well. If you so they're making a lot this last shooting in Minneapolis, which is the state I live in Minnesota.
Oh
It's in
yeah,
Minneapolis.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
here.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it happened to be a transgender person that shot. Well, they're saying ban, transgender people and it's not the transgender, it's the how you treat people is why they shoot. And if you treat people as an outcast and you make fun of them and you are mean to them and bully them, and what do you think's going to happen? you know, not. I mean, most people aren't going to shoot. I mean, most people are more rational than that. It's evil, but if you treat thousands and thousands of people that way, one of them is going to shoot. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
especially when you
Absolutely.
have that many guns. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I never understood that. I never understood how many more people need to shoot in the US. How many more schools? Why does this not end? I deep
Yeah.
down, of course, I know why, and you know
Right.
why, but
Right.
that's another story. We're not a
Right.
political podcast, but
Right. Right.
yeah, it's basically when you look at the world, it's all about the weapon industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the whatever other industry. It's all about greed and power.
Right. And I would say maybe the side of the political aisle that is much more for gun independence. I'm not even going to say gun rights. Uh, they are also the party of religion. They base a lot of their stuff on, well, this is what God said. God said, what about love thy neighbor, which is a commandment,
Yeah,
or I think it is. I don't know. I'm not religious, but I know that's in the Bible.
yeah.
But and that's yeah, it's not about we can make this a religious podcast too. It's not about to me, religion isn't about necessarily honoring God in directly. It's about treating humans well, and that's the best way to honor God, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
And I think treating other people the way you want to be treated is basic.
That's
That's
the
that
golden
that
rule.
can
Yeah,
solve all the problems if you ask me.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Now, you wrote this book, Beyond the
yeah,
Darkness, and you said, did you say, I'm not sure if I remember well, you started writing after your transplant, or had
I
you
did.
started?
Yeah.
You did after, yeah.
I didn't even know. So I was in Oslo. I went to Oslo to find my great great grandparents. Their grave was there, and I found my great great grandparents' grave. And this church they started, and then I wasn't able to do anything in Oslo because I was. That's when I started getting sick. I was in Oslo, and I just laid in my hotel bed and let the days go by, just laying there. And that's when I first heard about the term dark tourism. It's an academic term. And I was reading this National Geographic article, and it talked to this guy named Philip Stone, who's the world's academic leader in dark tourism. And so the interesting part is so that was in my head, and I had gone to a lot of the places that the article had talked about. So that was in my head when I went to after my transplant when I was out in California, and I said, like this is meaningful. I need to tell people about how much these dark tourism spots. It's not only about learning about history. Is kind of what I thought I was doing is just going to these places to learn about history and maybe honor the people, but to learn about history. Um, and that along with that knowledge that okay, this is dark, there's dark tourism, and so I that's where the book came. And then I put out a concise edition of the book, just a 100 page. I don't even think it was that long. I think it was more like 70 pages. This concise edition of the book, and it did really well. And that same person I had talked about, that Philip Stone, Dr. Philip Stone, he's at the University of Lancashire in the UK. He actually contacted me, read my book, really liked my book, thought that this was really in line with his theories on dark tourism. He does a thing called um, mindful mediate or mortality mediation was his, where people go to dark tourism to kind of reflect on their own deaths and things like that. And I sort of expanded on that where it's like you get all these different types of reflections. It's not just about death. And but anyway, so we developed a friendship, and he wrote the foreword to my book. So I have the world's foremost academic in dark tourism, which is an academic discipline. It was coined by researchers in the 1990s. So to me, that's 100 times better than having any celebrity write my foreword. I mean, having the
Oh,
most legit
absolutely.
person in that field. Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I had not, even though I have been, I am a tourist, I've been in tourism all my life. I started
Hmm.
off as a tour guide. I have never heard of dark tourism. And of course, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
You were, when you were saying about how you felt in that gas chamber when the tour group left and you were there by yourself, or generally when you were in Hiroshima. Do you
Hmm.
believe in energy? Are we energy? Did you feel energy in that room? You said, did you feel fear?
I felt a absolute mix of emotions. I couldn't even tell you how I felt. I just know that I felt, oh, man, I could try and name some of these, but so I felt just sad for one. I mean, it was profound sadness in there. It was joy for my own life, minimal joy, but just like, man, thank God I did not have to go through something like this. And then you have, regret that this ever even happened. And you have, guilt that, maybe somehow you couldn't have done more. And even though I knew this, like I wasn't even born back then, my grandpa fought in the war. He tried, but, like, oh, I wish I could have done. So you have just this just ball of emotions when you go through there. And over the next several days, it sort of starts to unravel. I would consider it very similar to, I've never done psychedelics, unfortunately. I would, but I was at a conference recently with Bezel van der Kolk, and he is the world's foremost expert in trauma. Most people would think, and but he was talking about psychedelics and how he really feels that those are, the have the most potential as the up and coming treatment for trauma. But anyway, he had talked about it um, how it takes you apart. It takes the different parts of your personality all apart, and you can see them from the outside, and then you put them back together in a more helpful way. And I think dark tourism does a similar thing. I'd also liken it to the astronaut effect, or the overview effect, where astronauts go to outer space and they look back and see how small they are in the world and how big the universe is, and it just changes their life in an instant. um, Dark tourism in the gas chamber at Auschwitz, going through the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum and the complex there, the 9/11 fountains. I mean, I could go on and on. Even the Paris catacombs, walking through the Paris catacombs with all the 6 million skeletons buried. And they're not buried, they're just in there. And here I think one of the most significant places I've ever been is the Whitney plantation, which most plantations in the United States they play up the beauty of it, and oh, the antebellum South, how nice. And this Whitney plantation is by New Orleans. It talks about it from the slavery point of view. It's a beautiful place, but it talks about the horrors and the reflections you get from those places is life changing. And it does. It separates yourself, just like I would say psychedelics or an astronaut effect would. It just rips you apart over the several days. I know coming back from Hiroshima, I was on the bullet train going to Kyoto, and I just like I still was like, why am I not feeling it? I had such intense emotions yesterday going through that, and it's like, why am I not, but it took several days for it really to hit me. During the time, I mean, I had tears in my eyes the whole time. It was hard to, I walked through with these kids, and it just like they're learning about how America bombed their ancestors. I mean, civilians, and it's like that's not okay. And walking through there with them is just like it was just gut wrenching and heartbreaking. And it was nighttime, and they let these lanterns go on the river there. And I mean, there's these hundreds of kids doing this, and it's like God. I mean, and I'm just this American whose grandfather fought in the war, and I'm so proud of the American heritage, but in what we did in World War II. But not everything was good in that we did in World War II either. I mean,
Well, nothing
so
in a war is ever good, is it? There's
no, God, no,
Yeah,
no.
that's the thing. History is I call it his story,
Yeah,
whatever side
yeah,
you're on.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
from what I understand through what you're saying is that dark tourism is therapeutic. It's therapy.
Yeah,
And especially if you are or somebody is traumatized by something that affects you personally, you should face it. You should actually go to this place to be able to take it apart.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's where it is, walking through those dark places. So, for example, when I was called for my transplant, and there was a delay in my transplant. And my brain, I think going through a lot of these places, my brain starts to think in terms of history. And I thought about the people on D-Day, where they had a delay of a day because of storms. And so they knew it was going on. And like, okay, are we going to get through this? Are we going to get to the beach? Are we, and then I started thinking like their mission was to get to the other side of the beach. My mission is to get to that transplant. And so this delay. And then there was, the delay turned into my liver getting canceled. There was an issue with the liver, and it was canceled. And so I had to go back home. At that time, my lungs were filling up with fluid. The sac around my lungs were filling up with fluid. It was hard to breathe. I didn't, and I was really starting to turn yellow. My eyes, finally, I could admit, like, oh my God, my eyes are super yellow. I had to have a before and after picture. Day before the transplant, day after. It's a night and day difference in what my eyes looked like. And I remember just laying in that bed before I went home, just reflecting on, after I learned my liver wasn't going to happen, I'm just laying in that bed, reflecting on these people at D-Day. And then, fast forward, I have had my transplant, and I thought back to Winston Churchill went through his war rooms, and in London, they have the Churchill War Rooms where he spent most of his time in his bunker talking to Roosevelt and planning things, and then at Parliament, you could picture him giving the speech. We will fight on the beaches, da, da, da. And he had the saying, when you're walking through hell, keep walking, or actually, when you're going through hell, keep going. And after my transplant, I felt better right away, but my guts were sliced from side to side, and it was basically recovering from the surgery at that point. And so getting out of bed, walking was the most important thing, and it was so painful. It was the most painful thing also. And I would think back to that. It's like when you're going through hell, keep going. And Winston Churchill was in my brain so much during that time. And then again, the suffering from all of, especially Auschwitz and the Whitney plantation and places where they're suffering, you know, when you go to those places, you feel like you're carrying their torch forward, carrying their story forward. that they didn't have to die in vain because we're never forgetting. And we have this motto, at least in the United States, and I'm guessing it's across the world too, is like never forget 9/11, never forget, you know, whatever, this and that, and the troops and and going to dark tourism and remembering them and them coming back to help you feel not so alone. It feels like they're rewarding you for carrying their story forward. And going back to your energy, yeah, there is energy, whether it's a supernatural type of energy or just, a psychic type energy. There is energy in those places, and they come back to reward you when you are least expecting.
Beautiful. And it's true. I mean, I totally believe in energy. There is lots of energy. And I also believe in what you give out comes back. We're
Yeah.
coming to the end, chat. I want to know, where
Yeah.
can people buy your book?
Anywhere books are sold for the most part. They're not in all the stores, but the store could likely be able to order it for you. But your typical
People are
Am.
listening to this podcast, will be listening to this podcast.
Mhm.
I have downloads in 140 countries now. So is Amazon a place?
Amazon's a place. Barnes and Noble, Blackstone. Oh gosh, it's
Yeah,
it's an audio book, and it's on all the regular audiobook platforms, Spotify, Apple, those types of places too. So nobody has an excuse to not get it.
excellent,
Yeah,
excellent. Well, Chad, I am so glad that you made it to the beach, because
yeah,
that's what I come
exactly.
for.
The
Yes.
metaphorical beach, absolutely.
And I want to thank you for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Chad Scott.
Thanks so much for having me, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.